Oh, wow.
It was very good. And actually, I didn't hear anything, but I'm probably still compiling the results. But I sent a few clients on because they were given free sperm tests. And that all came from research on the amount of plastics in the environment, particularly plastics, but not just plastics. As you mentioned, the aerosols, the bad makeup or whatever. There's a lot of different toxins in the environment.
Birth control, anything that gets flushed down the toilet or down the drain,
into the water supply,
back into the water supply. Yeah, absolutely.
Atrazine, antidepressants. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It doesn't bear thinking about, but
this isn't to freak people out either.
No,
you can't avoid toxins. You're going to exposed to a certain amount.
The point I was going to make actually on it was that if you nourish the mitochondria, you dramatically raise your ability to detoxify.
There you go.
That's the key point.
Natural detoxification.
Yeah. And like
every cell has its own detoxification pathways.
Every cell has its own detoxification pathway, and there's literally a system in the body for taking something that shouldn't be there and kind of handing it along. I don't know, think of it as like what do you call those bucket chains where you're taking a bucket of water, throwing it in the fire at the end of the line. Yeah. You're handing the toxin along, but each kind of handoff changes the toxin somewhat to make it more excretable.
We call it our phases of the detoxification. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Exactly, yeah. There's phases, and that's all done. That's a metabolic function that's done by enzymes that are produced in the cells that need energy, that don't work. The mitochondria are unstable. They need proteins. They need fats. They need all that stuff.
So what we're basically saying is that the toxic substance can be taken and made safe, in a sense, to be then shipped out of the body. Ideally, that's in a nutshell. That's what's happening. But unfortunately, sometimes the toxic load for people can be so great, or the inability to detoxify may not be just adequate if there's not the adequate nutrients there to meet the demand. Exactly. And those toxins can then be recirculated. Yeah.
They get recirculated, they get stored, they lodge in the liver, lodge in the brain. You will, like, the body will eventually, if you went into a toxin-free world, the body would eventually kick them out, unless you had some sort of like maybe genetic impairment in the detoxification pathway. In which case, even in that case, the genetic impairment, if it was fatal, you wouldn't make it past birth. So it's not fatal, but it compromises as you get older. But you can actually boost those pathways if you get the right nutrients also. That is getting into a kind of a form of using nutrients in a medicine dose way, but it's possible. In other words,
we're looking at nutrigenomics there.
You're looking at nutrigenomics. You're looking at like not just you're looking at like, again, it's kind of on the concept of moving towards optimal nutrition, but you're looking at like complex testing and trial and error in a sense with certain nutrients, usually in a high dose, in order to activate some function that you found out that the genes are under-functioning, but they're under-functioning at a particular pathway that needs a certain amount of certain nutrient. If you can kind of supply that nutrient, you can drive the pathway a bit faster. That's complicated stuff, but you can do that.
And that's not necessarily a good thing, though, to be pushing those nutrients, because some people may not tolerate those nutrients. Let's say those. Okay, if we go down a different pathway here, we might be talking about something like the MTHFR. So methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme. So that many people have actually, that runs at a reduced rate, shall we say. And unfortunately, sometimes they may read about this, they may have had their genetic testing done, and then they go down the route of purchasing supplements, and it could be the completely wrong form. They may end up buying something that may be a methylated form that they don't actually need or can't tolerate. And then, like, by using those, they could be just really skewing the pathway even further.
Overdriving one part of it and underdriving another. It's a complicated game.
It's very nuanced. That's why it's so individual, so
it's
personalized.
Very individual. It is, and it's like, and again, like, there's two ways to look at that. You can kind of say, oh well, I'll just like get somebody to help me with expensive and complicated lab testing, which you can do. Or you can tune into your body and start seeing whether you react good or bad to supplements. And that's the simplest, cheapest, and long term, it's the best thing to do. Exactly. I've actually got a fairly high compromise in the MTHFR pathway, I found out, 80%.
Same.
Like, are you same? Yeah.
Very same.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's probably
Compound
more.
heterozygous.
Yeah, it's probably more common than we think, but I wouldn't have known. But actually, it's, some stuff started to make sense after I figured it out. But there was I was listening to a scientist. Her name eludes me right now, but she's kind of in scientific circles. She's kind of famous as the one who, I don't know if she broke the news, but she made it famous about these toxins getting into sperm. Oh, she's probably like in her 70s or 80s now.
Okay.
She's being interviewed on podcasts around the world. Yeah, this girl is. I was listening to her talk. Her lab has done these measurements. It's kind of mad. Like, so she's talking about toxins in general, but she's talking about one of the things it centers on is these phthalates, which is PTHALAT, phthalates, and a lot of that comes from soft plastics. So she has measured the blood
the cord blood. Am I right? In the umbilical cord blood?
She's probably done that. She measured the blood of neonates that were essentially being on life support systems for being early births, preterm, and so they have to use soft plastic tubing to keep these babies alive, and they're feeding them through the tubes. And she's measured the blood of the babies that aren't getting the soft plastic tubes put in them, and the ones that are have the phthalates.
Wow.
And it's not just in their blood, it's in their poop, it's in, it goes into their body. What was the other thing she measured? Yeah, like it's coming off your clothes. This is going to freak people out. Like flame
retardants and things.
Flame retardants. Do you know what the biggest one is? No, this wasn't her that said this, but there's different research. The microplastics idea, which is the thing. It's like the thing of our age. It's like the thing. It's in the sea. It's in the air. It's whatever. Do you know where most of it's coming from?
Surprise me.
Paint.
Really?
Wall paint, regular paint.
Wow.
That's where I never even knew it was made of plastic. It's kind of like that's what gives it its structure.
Okay.
So it's coming off all the time, and that's the biggest source of microplastics. And it's like, oh, right, what am I going to do now?
The first thing people do is and freshen up paint in any house.
And that's not even necessarily saying that the biggest source of microplastics in human bodies is from paint. It's just the biggest source in the environment. So it's probably, it's getting blown away or washed away, or probably end up, I don't know where it ends up. But eating food from like hot, soft plastic containers is one way we get it. But the point being that your one has done these tests.
Always say use glass. If you're going to heat anything in a microwave, always use glass Tupperware, or glass container, should I say, rather than Tupperware. Exactly,
yeah. It's like she's removed the uncertainty here. It's definitely happening. And of course, now the race is on to figure out, well, is the plastic the thing that's causing the decline in sperm? And she's kind of like, I think so, but I'm not sure yet. And so they have correlated it, and they've correlated it into the amphibians and into the environment. And it's like, the more plastic, the worse the sperm count. But there's possibly 10 other things that could be causing it too. So we don't know. But
just as you're talking about sperm there, would you normally recommend that the first thing that's done is that the male
get a sperm test? If
there's a couple that are having difficulty.
Yeah, if a woman comes to me, I'm going to tell her that I'm not going to say, no, you can't work with me unless you get your guy tested. But I'm going to say, you need to get your guy tested. And so they normally do. And
that makes sense, because there's no point in you doing all this work with a woman and for her to really just go gung-ho into changing her lifestyle and everything else to find out later that it's actually something is an issue with morphology of the sperm or or motility or whatever. Yeah,
so like a year and a half down the road, she's tried everything, and next thing your man's like, oh, it's not me. It's funny that I've heard it a few times from clients. It's kind of like guys saying when they found out that their sperm was normal, they kind of went, oh, thank God, it's not me. Okay. I actually, on the other hand, think it's kind of a pity, like, because it's a lot easier to fix.
Easier fix.
Yeah. If it was you're kind of more sorted. Not guaranteed, but you're kind of more sorted. But
that also goes to show that there's possibly that underlying subconscious blame assignment on either partner or, and that could be an undercurrent to the stressors that are.
I tend to find that if a woman has problems, it's kind of like, oh, sugar, there's problems, let's work it out. But if the man has problems, that's where the blame comes in. For himself. Not the woman is blaming him, he's blaming himself. He's like, oh, it is me. And it's kind of like a threat to your identity or something.
Okay.
I'm hypothesizing here, but it's kind of like, my only job here is to supply the payload. That's not true, but that's the way they're thinking.
Okay.
Like, my only job is to supply the payload. If something wrong with the payload, something wrong with me, oh my God. And it goes into like, maybe she won't value me. Am I really a man? And I understand that. I get that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a misperception, but it's a real perception.
Yeah.
Because A, mostly you can fix it. But B, it's not a value judgment. It's like you're a victim of the environment. Yeah, maybe your habits and all. Yeah, sure. But like, you have tools to fix this. So it's not as big a deal. I would say, on balance, sperm problems are easier to fix than something like erectile dysfunction. Sometimes that's resistant. You can fix it, but sometimes it's resistant. But it's like, and they go hand in hand sometimes. But like, sperm problems are so you're fixing like toxins, you're fixing vascular problems, you're fixing blood sugar, kind of more obvious stuff, and it's easier to track. And a man doesn't have to put up with the longer term sort of testing of your cycle to see what's happening there. And if you have, like, say, PCOS and you have a long cycle, you're waiting longer again because each cycle is so long. Like, the man doesn't have to do that. They have other things. You have to tune in and to figure the same stuff out and make the same type of changes. But it's just quicker and easier generally.
Well, coming back to that, and you mentioned about how it takes the 13 cycles for the female eggs to come to the full maturity before they're ready for ovulation. Talk about sperm and the production from start to finish, from germ cell to...
Yeah, it's kind of similar, except that it's not
slightly shorter.
It's shorter. It's not like the last push in the last month. There's no ovulation as such. So it's the same hormones drive it: the FSH, DLH, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. There's like little what do you call them? Swimming pools or like nurseries for the sperm that start off, and the production of it is one side of the story. What the people see on tests and like what they get measured is probably the bit that's more interesting to them. Like, so you're producing sperm bit by bit by bit. Like, you're maturing them in the testicles and in these special vesicles, and they're getting nourished and they're kind of hanging around and they're getting bigger and more mature. And then they're ejaculated, right? Now, sometimes they're not ejaculated because there's a block and there's a problem, or they're not even being produced. So it's kind of easier to identify where the problem is. But what most guys are seeing is, most guys with sperm problems, what they're seeing is either the shape or the ability to swim, like the look of them or the ability to swim, or the number, the count, is a problem, is like low or bad or whatever.
So they're looking at, if they're reading a result, they're looking at morphology, they're looking at motility, and the sperm count.
And the sperm count. And then there's other stuff on the sperm tests, like pH or like white blood cells. They can be somewhat useful. Like, if there's white blood cells, it's kind of like the immune system is infiltrating, so it's trying to address something. That would be like one of those situations where the body has prioritized like an immune response because it senses a threat, and it could be it's right there in the testicles, or it could be it's just in the blood generally in the body. Like there's something going on in the blood. But I think there's like one of the common blockages, if you like, in men is this thing called varicocele, which is essentially varicose vein of the testicles. This is one of those cases where if you have enough time, you could probably bring it back to normality with natural therapy, and you should definitely start doing that. But sometimes you just need a bit of surgery to get it sort of freed up and get the blood flowing better there, and it affects things you wouldn't think of are the main issue, like temperature. So it's not just nutrients; it's temperature as well. If the blood is pooling there and it can't like circulate and cool it, or get back to normal temperature, that's one of the issues. But the production. So first of all, if you produce a sperm sample and analyze it, you're going to see. It's not like you get back a test that says yes or no, it's good or bad, or it's above range or it's below range. What you get back is a convoluted kind of a test, giving you different readings on different things. And the thing to understand is that when you ejaculate, it's not just the finished sperm that get ejaculated; it's all of them.
It's a mix.
It's a mix. So even in the healthiest ejaculate, some of the sperm are going to be immature. So you might see that on your test, going, "Oh God, I've only got like X amount of, motile sperm." It's like, yeah, no, that's normal. Just because some of them just aren't ready yet. But you just need to have enough of the good swimmers, and they literally test. It shows if they can swim in a straight line, and so
Because they're like missiles. They have just one job to do. They got to get right through into the cervix and towards the egg.
If you think about it, it's such a mad thing. Like, it's a cell. Each one is a cell, funny shaped cell with a tail,
and that's where all its mitochondria are, in the tail.
Yeah, and that exactly, and its job is to go into another body and move around. It's such a mad idea.
Yeah.
And it's got to work its way through like valleys and mountains inside and swim up the inside of the womb lining, find its way to this tiny ovary, tiny fallopian tube opening. There's hormones literally calling it up. There's assassins waiting for it in the womb to kill it, to kill the weak ones. So it's like the whole system is designed to make sure only the strong remain. It's not a perfect system, but that's kind of what it's designed to do. And they're like supposed to find their way in this alien territory that they've never been in. It's such a mad idea.
Absolutely blows my mind as well.
And you know, but anyway, I could get lost on this one. It's kind of like I think if you boil a lot of the problems back, it comes back to inflammation and oxidative stress, things we've been talking about, which means it comes back to energy stability again. It's the same underlying problem all the time.
And for that swimmer, as they say, that's taken roughly about 72 days, am I right in saying 72 days or a little bit more?
To produce.
Roughly, to that fully mature.
Roughly kind of 3 months or less kind of thing, And so you can, like, if your body is struggling with inflammation or oxidative stress and you take steps to eliminate it, and if you take very effective steps quickly and you sort of, let's use the word reboot from it, if you reboot your body, you've only got to wait a relatively short amount of time before you see the results of that. And if you do that effectively, like I've seen lots of guys who have, their count is too low, their morphology is bad, the motility is low, so their swimming in a straight line is bad, and all three of them are suddenly normal on the next test, 3 months later or whatever. And then there's a pregnancy. That's a thing. And so there's no question, but whilst you're dealing with the same underlying principles in a man, it's generally simpler. Now the psychological stuff we talked about earlier is the same problem in men and women. The resistance and the identity issues and all that's related. Relationship with your father, like, or your mother, with yourself, self-awareness, all that stuff is exactly the same. But it's like, I suppose it's got a kind of its own gender slant on it, so to speak. It's like, men deal with things differently. Women, in general, not the individual will buck that trend, but in general, that's actually going back to the start of what we talked about. I said that the infertility was like the club nobody wanted to be in. That's the thing guys don't talk about. Like, guys are in a club on their own there, and the funny kind of part of it is like passing somebody in the in the fertility ward. Do you know what? The funniest recount of that was in a scene from The West Wing. Did you ever watch The West Wing?
I did, yeah.
Toby Ziegler had they had an IVF baby in the series, and he's telling the story of, like, you go into the building, you press the button on the lift, there's 4 or 5 people in the lift, you get out on the floor that says infertility or something, and you go walk into the room, to masturbate, and everyone sees you going in. It's like, what the hell? This is so wrong. It was so funny the way he did it. But that's when guys kind of see, there's other guys with the same problem. But otherwise they don't talk about it, don't know. Definitely way smaller circle than women. And even women don't like to talk about it in a lot of cases.
Just taboo subject.
It's a taboo subject. Like, the amount of women have told me that nobody knows. Initially, nobody knows. Maybe after a year someone knows, but like initially, it's like my husband, that's it. Or my sister, my mother. It's a very small group to talk about.
And I can understand that people may be anxious to share that because they don't necessarily want to have the questions, well, any joy this month? When are you going to... And there's nothing worse than pressure on a couple, especially when they've just gotten married. Well, it's, when's the baby coming along? And that can be heartbreaking.
I think we're kind of getting to the point where the problem is on the rise, and we're getting to the point where it's kind of like everyone, in a way, should kind of know, like, that's possibly a landmine of a question, because like, it's a landmine for so many people.
Well, there's personal choices. There are people who choose not to have families, so it's quite intrusive. In its own way, the question.
It is. Like, it's a fair question in its own way too, but it's intrusive and it can be just trigger things in other ways. It's kind of becoming one of those trigger questions, I guess. Yeah, I have to say on a personal note, I never really understood the idea of not wanting to have children until relatively recently. And like the last couple of years, I finally went, oh yeah, people be talking to me about it, and I was like, I always thought there was something wrong with you, but I realize now it's like, it's such an individual thing, and there's lots of genuine reasons for it. It's funny, conditioning, I guess. But especially, I suppose, in the business that I'm in, I'm always like, what do you mean you don't have? I'm spending all this time with people who are struggling, and you don't want one. That's funny thinking about it. But anyway, I don't know. Did I cover my sperm? Where was I? Did I finish my sperm story? I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah. Well, it does have one job to do.
One job to do.
It's a seeking missile. In other words,
yeah.
But we were talking about it being a little fat torpedo.
Actually, yeah, there is more to the story.
The toxins.
The toxins is one, but so like the test we mentioned, motility, morphology, sperm count. There's a kind of a separate test that really shouldn't be separate. It's generally a separate lab, and it's for DNA fragmentation. Mm-hmm. So often the first test can be fine, and then you can see a problem with the DNA fragmentation. It's unfortunately like kind of a 200 quid-ish test. So it's, everyone, guys should do it. If you find no problem in the first one and you're struggling with infertility in your couple, you should still go and get the second one. Every guy should get the 2 tests. Mm-hmm. Now, if the first test shows that there's a problem, you don't really need the second test because you know there's a problem. Yeah. Because you're still, no matter what happens, you're going to do the same things to fix both things anyway. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of save that money.
Will you just explain what DNA fragmentation is?
So in the head of the sperm, essentially, in the sperm, there's the genetic payload, the DNA, and it's wrapped up differently in sperm than it is in every other cell, and that's because the sperm is designed to move, mm-hmm. and it wiggles. You've probably seen it on YouTube or whatever, but it wiggles ferociously, like vigorously, like a tadpole, mm-hmm. And so it's designed to have the energy and the nutrients to propel itself into that alien, hostile environment, mm-hmm. And when it gets to the egg, it's always somewhat exhausted and depleted. Always. And if you take so let's say it takes 6 hours to like 2 days or 1 day for the sperm to get it to, if it even gets to the fallopian tube, only a few do. But if it gets there, it's been vigorously fighting its way up there the whole time. If you take that sperm into a lab and measure it, you'll see that the DNA that was coiled up tightly inside it has begun to unravel because of all the shaking. And there's nothing the sperm can do about that. It's just some of it unravels. And sometimes then, because if the unraveling is bad enough, it starts to fragment or break up slightly. And it becomes damaged, essentially. Now, not all of it becomes damaged. Some of it becomes damaged, but there's a kind of a spectrum of damage. And if it passes a certain threshold, then they'll say, well, you've got DNA fragmentation. And that's a sign that the sperm itself just wasn't vibrantly healthy enough to make the journey without kind of essentially falling apart. Yeah. Now, so DNA fragmentation above a threshold is a problem. But even if the sperm, this is part of the story, even if the sperm gets to the egg in the fallopian tubes without passing the threshold of DNA fragmentation, it's still going to have some damage, mm-hmm. if you want to call it damage. It's like natural wear and tear, so to speak. And this point is kind of super important, I think, for guys to know, especially if you already know that your female partner is struggling with some form of infertility, like whether it's PCOS or whether it's like egg quality issues or whatever. The sperm has no ability to repair itself. It doesn't have the machinery. Mm-hmm. It's just designed for speed and endurance. And the egg, once the fusing happens, the conception happens, the egg is the one with the machinery. The egg is way, way, way bigger than the sperm. And it's got the kind of machinery, so to speak, to fix, to repair damage in the sperm, and it's designed to do that. So the two cells join together, they form a whole new cell, and it's got its own life, it's got its own, characteristics. And the first thing it does is set about repairing any of the damage in the DNA, so that, and as it starts to sort of rapidly replicate and turn into a human, it's repairing.
Women are always trying to fix men.
It's a
In fairness.
the women fix the men in this case,
I
straight up.
jest.
It's a straight up thing in this case. It's like so the egg has to be vibrant to look after itself and to take care of any damage to the sperm.
Mm-hmm.
So the healthier the sperm, the less energy has to be expended by the egg to fix it. And that, like raising the threshold of health in the sperm, can sometimes overcome the conception problem.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the egg should be as vibrantly healthy as possible, but if it isn't and they're struggling and you're trying to get it healthy, you have to get the sperm healthy to take the pressure off the egg to make conception happen. And you can have a healthy child with that because the repair process will work if it's reasonably healthy.
What you've just said there, in a nutshell, should come as a comfort, though, to couples, especially for women, if they know that, oh, hang on a second, it doesn't all lay at my door.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah.
Not all of the responsibility is mine. And if we do, all the more reason to have that why and have that why together as a couple and having those tough conversations.
Yeah.
And then saying, you know, hold each other accountable for the changes and being supportive. You know, if as practitioners, if we suggest, you know, a change in diet, you know, and it's not about forgetting all your old ways or anything else. It's making tweaks. Sometimes it's just about adding in things that are missing. For some people, that may be a key thing. And then the other strategies, the lifestyle strategies, and knowing that you have the support of somebody else who's there rather than a partner sitting down at night eating a takeaway in front of you when you're trying your best to avoid those foods.
Yeah.
I think that can make such a difference then that you have that common goal.
And that's a big thing. I think it's quite common actually. And like not that there isn't necessarily like any like badness in the guy that's doing that. They're just not tuned in to the situation. But like if you take the couple as a unit and if the unit knows that it has a problem, both parties should be absolutely aiming for their best to try and solve it. And so that goes even that cuts across the psychology of like, here you go away and fix yourself. I'm having a pizza here. Like that could be such a destructive mindset that you pass on and you're like, I'm trying everything. It's all me. But I'm not the problem. So here's the thing you have to know, guys. The threshold for healthy sperm is set by the World Health Organization. So the threshold numbers have come down several times over the years. They've revised them downward. And initially their argument was, we kind of got it wrong. It's kind of, you don't need to have these high thresholds. Remember I said earlier that not every sperm that comes out is ready. So there's a natural... It's
immature.
It's immature, naturally immature. So there's a natural threshold there somewhere. But they were kind of arguing that, the threshold is a bit too high. But actually it turns out from the laboratories themselves, not from the World Health Organization, but from the laboratories that are doing this test, that